the narrative is this all started in Texas. Where are we in Texas, and what do we need to know about the state of play there?
Sure. So Texas took the opportunity to redraw its congressional map during a special session that occurred in August, and then a second special session later on in August. The state went through and created 5 Republican pickup opportunities. Those 5 are one's in North Dallas, one's east of Houston, one's in the San Antonio area, and then 2 are districts that were previously pickup opportunities in South Texas that got better for us. So those maps are currently the subject of litigation in El Paso, and we expect an opinion any day on those maps, but qualifying opened on Saturday, and the state is in a good position moving forward. So, I mean, it's an opportunity for 5 new seats. But Sean, as you know, this did not start in Texas. This is something that Republicans took the opportunity to go on offense because we were staring down the barrel of Democrats suing to blue across the country, trying to flip the majority like they had in previous cycles just through litigation. And Republicans had a choice to either go on offense and shore up the majority or allow the Democrats to continue to sue virtually unopposed to try to flip the majority. And so that's where we are today.
All right, guys, good day to you. I think this is, to me, a very special show. If you remember the road to 270, we went state by state. Well, right now, I'm going to do the same thing on redistricting. If you're a political geek, dork, whatever you want to call yourself, today's show is for you. I'm going to explain for you. I've got the best guest in the country, Adam Kincaid. He leads the national redistricting effort for the Republicans. He's going to break down every state Republicans are trying to pick up seats, every state Dems are trying to pick up seats. Trust me, you will hear this nowhere else. You will come out so much smarter on politics. Republicans have a 3-seat majority. If they lose the majority, it's impeachment, subpoenas, investigations. That's how critical this is. So we're going to break it down like nobody else. Before I bring in Adam, though, I got to tell you, this time of year is all about family gatherings, gift giving, parties. And if you want to have the best gifts, the best things when someone comes over or something that you send to someone else, get something unbelievably unique. Get them a Kexi cookie set. It is unbelievable. Kexi is a family-run bakery that makes gourmet cookies the absolute right way with real butter, real pure vanilla, and ingredients that you can actually pronounce. They handcraft every cookie, seal them fresh, and deliver them right to your door. They're the perfect kind of cookies that your grandmother or your aunt used to make when you were growing up. I'm telling you, these things are amazing. They're soft, they're thick, they're full. Oh, they're so delicious. And right now, Kexi has a Christmas box available that's packed with limited edition holiday-themed cookies that make the absolute perfect gift. So go get your Christmas box today at Kexi. That's KEKSI.com. Kexi.com, and grab something there from their site. My gift to you is my code, Sean15, SEAN, 15% off your order. Kexi is the most unique, perfect gift that you want to have at your house and give to others that no one else will have. Kexi, KEKSI.com. Use code Sean15. All right, guys. I've always told you about one of my good buddies that's been with this show since the beginning, Leo Grillo. He's the founder of Delta Rescue. Delta Rescue is the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. Not a shelter. They take malnutrition dogs, cats, horses that have been abused, abandoned, and take care of them for life. What they have done at Delta Rescue is nothing short of amazing. If you go to deltarescue.org, you can watch the videos, see exactly what I'm talking about. But there are no big USAID grants or political pro subscriptions. Delta Rescue relies entirely on our donations. I made a personal donation to Delta Rescue. Go to deltarescue.org. Join me in supporting the great work of Leo Grillo. deltarescue.org. And if you're so moved, go to the estate planning kit and see if you can help make this an enduring mission through an old stock or 401k that you have. deltarescue.org. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in Adam Kincaid. He's the president and executive director of the National Republican Redistricting Trust. Adam, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Sean, good to see you too. It's been a while. Good to talk to you.
It has been a while. And for those viewers out there, Adam and I crossed paths for a while at the Republican National Committee, and this is his wheelhouse. He is the national expert on this front. So I kind of, just so viewers understand it, back in the day, we did a road to 270 during the election. We went state by state. So similarly, I count about 16, 17 states that are in play on one side or the other. I want to talk first about the states that Republicans have done, are completed, Democrats completed, and then let's go to target areas and see what the math looks like as we go forward. So The narrative is this all started in Texas. Where are we in Texas, and what do we need to know about the state of play there?
Sure. So Texas took the opportunity to redraw its congressional map during a special session that occurred in August, and then a second special session later on in August. The state went through and created 5 Republican pickup opportunities. Those 5 are one's in North Dallas, one's east of Houston, one's in the San Antonio area, and then 2 are districts that were previously pickup opportunities in South Texas that got better for us. So those maps are currently the subject of litigation in El Paso, and we expect an opinion any day on those maps. But qualifying opened on Saturday, and the state is in a good position moving forward. So, I mean, it's an opportunity for 5 new seats. But Sean, as you know, this did not start in Texas. This is something that Republicans took the opportunity to go on offense because we were staring down the barrel of Democrats suing to blue across the country, trying to flip the majority like they had in previous cycles just through litigation. And Republicans had a choice to either go on offense and shore up the majority or allow the Democrats to continue to sue virtually unopposed to try to flip the majority. And so that's where we are today.
If the maps hold, when you say opportunity to pick up 5, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being there's no question there'll be a Republican in that seat, where do those seats stand?
Sure. I think that if we want to go north to south, I think Texas 32, which is north of Dallas, is going to be a pickup for Republicans. East of Houston, there's a seat, Texas 9 now. Also, I think it's going to be a 10 pickup opportunity for Republicans. Republicans have good opportunities to pick up Texas 35, which is in the San Antonio area. I'd probably give that one an 8 to 10 as well. I think it's a great pickup opportunity to solidly Republican seat across various iterations of our coalitions over the last decade. And then the 2 South Texas seats, these are battleground districts. They were battleground districts before. And with good candidates and good campaigns, I think both are winnable. I'd put probably Texas 34, which is in southeastern Texas. It goes from Brownsville north to Corpus Christi. That one's probably an 8. I'd put a 7 or 8. And then I'd put Texas 28 is probably a 5.
Okay. So let's call this 5+ seats. We expect to pick 5 out of there. So Republicans up 5. Let me move to Ohio. They're finished with their redistricting, correct? And what are we looking at out of Ohio?
Yeah, Ohio's got the most complicated redistricting process in the country. They have this multiple stage thing. And so what Republicans and Democrats did, defying all expectations, is they got together and they cut a deal on a new map that, and what it does overall is it gives Republicans a better chance to flip Marcy Kaptur's Ohio 9, which is based up in the Toledo area. That seat is now going to be a Trump plus 10 district in 2024. So it's a great opportunity for us to go pick up that seat. You've got let's see here. The Ohio 13 actually got better for Democrats. It was kind of the trade-off as part of their deal. So that was Amelia Sykes' seat around the Akron area. That seat's now a seat that Kamala Harris carried by 2 or 3 points. It was previously a 50-50 seat, so it gives her a better shot of holding on to that one in 2026. But then Congressman Landsman down in Southwest Ohio, in the Cincinnati area, his seat went from a pretty decent Democrat seat to one that's now carried by President Trump in 2024. It's a Republican pickup opportunity. It'll be a battleground, and it's going to be a fight. But overall, Ohio, we should be at least +1 coming out of this cycle going into the 2026 midterms.
All right, so that's +6, 2 states in. Let's move to Missouri. Give us the lay of the land there. What can we expect Republican seat-wise out of the Missouri map?
Sure. So the current map is a 6-2 map. So like 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats. There's a Democrat seat in Kansas City and a Democrat seat in St. Louis. That Kansas City seat is Missouri 5. Missouri 5 went from a seat that was heavily Kamala Harris district to one that President Trump now carried by 18.5 points. So it's a solid red seat, anchored in the central part of the state. That's the subject now of a veto referendum campaign by the left that's being litigated against by the state in federal court. Democrats are suing, obviously, to try to block that map. But should it survive the veto referendum and all these different lawsuits, the Republicans will be +1 in Missouri. It's a 71 map now. And we'll see how that plays out. If they do successfully collect the signatures to keep to force this map to the ballot, there's various options that Republicans have to still get a good 7-1 map by 2026.
So it seems to me in both Ohio and Missouri, we probably could have gotten at least one, if not two more seats total out of them, but we probably were a little more cautious.
Well, to carve up the St. Louis area takes a lot of work. There's a very dense Democrat population right there in the St. Louis area that would have overhauled the map in a way that probably wasn't doable. Ohio could have been more aggressive, but I think that the Democrats and Republicans got together. Democrats wanted to shore up the incumbent if they could, and Republicans clearly wanted to avoid a veto referendum like that's going on in Missouri. So I think that was how that deal came together.
All right, 3 states in, by my math, and this is your wheelhouse, not mine, we're up 7 seats. Let's move to North Carolina, because there's a story that I saw recently that said voting rights advocates are sounding the alarm over North Carolina's Republican efforts, accusing the proposed new map of discriminating against black voters in particular. So what's the status of North Carolina's redistricting efforts?
Yeah, so the North Carolina Republicans, when we all started this mid-decade redistricting thing this cycle, I thought it'd be really weird if we went through an entire cycle without North Carolina redrawing its maps. I mean, it happens almost every single cycle. And so about a month ago, North Carolina decided that it was going to do what they could have done last time, but they did this time, which is they took North Carolina 1, which was a district that President Trump narrowly carried in 2024, and converted it into a seat that he carried comfortably by more than 10 points. So that district now is the subject of renewed litigation, as these things always work out. But the thing is, in North Carolina, Democrats had brought a challenge against the North Carolina State Senate maps not too long ago. And a judge about 5-6 weeks prior ruled that there was no legally significant racially polarized voting in that region, nor in the state. And so that the Voting Rights Act did not compel the state to draw certain seats that the plaintiffs were seeking created in eastern North Carolina. So now you have the situation where North Carolina is redrawn. That's completely off of politics. They don't use racial data when they draw their lines in North Carolina. And it's before a 3-judge panel in Winston-Salem. It's going to hear a preliminary injunction hearing in about a week. And we'll see how that goes. But I think that North Carolina is in a very strong spot. They should be able to defend that map, and we'll have what was previously a 10-4 map should now be 11-3. 11 Republicans.
So that would be that's a +1 out of North Carolina, right?
That's right.
Okay. So far, 4 states in: Texas, Ohio, Missouri, and North Carolina. My math has us up 8 seats. Okay.
Yep.
And those are the only Republican states that are done so far, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. So let's move on to where the Dems have done their work. Obviously, California is the most prominent one that everybody heard a lot about. Walk me through what happened, what the state of play is for Republicans in California post this Gavin Newsom ballot, Proposition 50 on the ballot.
Sure. So obviously, California went through in August as well. They had a special session of their own. They put forward a map that purported to create 5 Democrat pickup opportunities in the state to quote unquote offset what Texas had done. The California map is it went after a Doug Ramalfa's seat in Northern California, Kevin Kiley's district. It drew Young Kim and Ken Calvert together. And then it also went in and made Darrell Issa's seat significantly worse. The other thing that they're counting as a 5th seat pickup is David Valladeo's seat in the Central Valley. It didn't really change that much, but they added a couple more points into that one for them. So they call it a +5 map. I think that, when you look at that map from top to bottom, there's some challenges for us, but there's also some opportunities as well. Some of their Central Valley seats remain competitive. There are no competitive seats in Texas outside of the 5 new pickup opportunities. Democrats did leave some competitive seats in the Central Valley. Darrell Issa, I think, is in a very good position to be able to, to run for re-election and win his district as they drew it. And then David Valadeo was proved to be a winner in various iterations of his district over the last little while, no matter how, Democrat that might be. And so I think Congressman Valadao is probably in a good position as well to be able to defend that seat. It'll be a fight, but I think that he'll be able to do it. So I think Democrats are going to say that they're +5. I think that they're probably more around the +3, but giving us an opportunity to really pick up to contest some seats in the Central Valley and have a good opportunity to defend Congressman Valadao and Congressman Isaac.
So in your mind, you're going to put them at +3 with the potential of 2 additional pickups.
That's right. That's where I put California's back.
Okay. The other thing is, so one of the things that I had heard, I want you to dispel me of this, is that not only did they pick up, 3 to 5 seats, but they shored up a lot of potential vulnerable Democrats. I hear you saying that there might be that may not be the case, that these Central Valley seats may actually be opportunities for pickup or at least competitive.
Yeah. So what they did in California, they shored up some of their vulnerable incumbents in Orange County, right, and some other folks like that. But they also didn't go as far as they could have gone in the Central Valley to shore up their folks. And this is kind of the bigger question I think that we've seen over the last couple weeks is, where do we see Latino voters going over the next several cycles, right? So Democrats are placing a bet on their California map, and they're saying, and to be clear, the folks in California, when they drew this map, they said, we're drawing it to comply with the Voting Rights Act. We're drawing, the map drawer for California, just in a presentation a couple weeks ago, came out and said, the first thing I did was create a new Latino district in the Los Angeles area, right? So they were really looking at the Hispanic numbers, the Latino coalition throughout California, and they said, we're going to place a bet that in 2026, this Hispanics will trend back our direction, and these seats will be fine, right? The reality is that if that's the case in 2026, maybe the map is good for them. But long term, if Republicans are able to continue to build their base of support among the Latino community, the California map is going to have a lot of good pickup opportunities for Republicans over the next couple of cycles because of how much the California folks base their map off of race. In Texas, it's the exact opposite. That map was drawn purely off of politics. There was no racial data used. Republicans went through and they said, look, where can we pick up seats? Where can, we'll look at the president's numbers. We'll look at Senator Cruz's numbers. We'll look at Governor Abbott's numbers. And we want to build a coalition, a group of districts that will perform for Republicans over the course of the next several cycles. Now, a lot of that is because some of those districts are, in fact, heavily Latino, but that was not the purpose of the way that map was developed. And so, it's interesting how, in California, you have the Democrats really basing their map off of race and looking at, Latino communities and hoping for the best that that's where they're headed. While in Texas, they're saying, look, this state is realigning in a conservative direction. We have faith in our electorate. We know that we can appeal to any community throughout the state. And so, it's just a completely different situation, but it's interesting to see how the two states tackled mid-decade redistricting in very different ways.
All right, let's move east from California to Utah. Utah, to me, solid red state, and yet I'm hearing that Dems are going to get seats out of this.
Yeah, so Utah is like a lot of other Western states that are Republican states, that they have liberal judiciaries. And that's because for a long time, what these states had were something called the Missouri Plan, which was a structure where the state bar associations would put together a list of people that they thought should be judges. They would send those to the legislature, to the governor, and then they had to pick from that list to nominate people to state Supreme Courts and lower courts. And so what you have are states like Kansas or Nebraska, to a lesser extent, these already used to be this way, in Utah, where you have very liberal judiciaries in very conservative states. And so Utah's courts are trending in the right direction based off some reforms over the last little while, but Utah still has a pretty liberal judiciary for the state as a whole. And so what you're finding in Utah is a couple of years ago, some voters got together and approved what they call Prop 4, which forced an advisory redistricting commission on the state of Utah. That advisory redistricting commission was adopted as what's equivalent to a statute. You know how you have your state constitution, you have your state code. Under Utah law, what they did is equivalent to the code, not the constitution. But the Utah courts came in and they said, you know what? This is the people voting here, so we're going to give that a heightened level of authority above the code, and almost pretty much the exact same tier as our state constitution. So while this is supposed to be an advisory commission, we really think the legislature should have not been able to adjust this or modify it in any way. And so you have to go back to the drawing board. And so what Utah legislators are saying is no. The state constitution still says that the state legislature draws the maps, right? That seems pretty clear, but that's kind of the crux of the legal fight in Utah. So we expect that the court in Utah will either approve this legislature's new map or impose a new one. Whoever wins will whoever loses will likely appeal up to the Utah Supreme Court. We'll find it out some more over the next few weeks. If this judge here in Utah allows the legislature to use its new map, it will have 2 solid red seats and 2 Republican-leaning competitive districts. So it'll give Republicans a good opportunity to hold all 4 of its seats in 2026. Obviously, the liberal plaintiffs who brought this challenge in the first place said, no, you can't do this. You can't draw 2 R seats and 2 R leaning competitive seats, even though it matches all the criteria of the state of the ballot measure. Is that you have to draw a Democrat district in Salt Lake City that's heavily Democrat. So they want a guaranteed pickup opportunity, right? Problem is, in order to do that, you actually have to gerrymander the state based off of all these different metrics that the academics use. And so that's what they're really suing for. So we'll see how that all plays out.
So it could either be status quo or +1 or 2 for the Dem?
It could be +1 for the Dems. It also could be status quo. But it's important to remember the status quo map will require great candidates and good campaigns. These are not blood red seats like they would have been a year ago as a result of this litigation. So we'll see how it plays out. Republicans in the state are putting forward a ballot measure to repeal Prop 4 completely next fall. So if that gets across the line, that'll be before the voters, and maybe this will be a one-cycle thing before we go back to a solid map again in 2028.
All right, so for the purposes of our math, let's give the Dems 1 seat. That gives them 4 that are done, California, and we'll give them 1 in Utah, and 8 for the Republicans. That's as far as I know, all the guaranteed done potential Dem pickups, right? And then we've got potential other states.
Sure. Yep,
all
there's
right.
potentials on both sides. Yep.
All right, so let's go into the potential additional pickups for the Republicans. Indiana is one that I'm mind blown about because it's ruby red. What's going on in Indiana, and what's the potential look like there?
Yeah, look, so there's a big fight in Indiana among the Republicans about whether or not this is something they should be tackling or not. Indiana's next door neighbor is Illinois, the most gerrymandered state in the country. Indiana for a long time has had this kind of approach. They're like, we want compact seats, we want to play by the rules, we want to be fair. And some of this resulted from the fact that Democrats had gerrymandered Indiana for decades when they had control. And so when Republicans took over, they didn't want to do the same thing the Democrats had done before, basically, right? And so so what you have now are Indiana's got 9 congressional seats. There are 7 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And, Indiana is now looking at the potential of picking up either one or both of those districts during a special session in December. So they're going to come back. It's technically part of their 2026 session, but they'd be doing this in, I think it's December 6th is when they're set to come back and take up redistricting.
So there's a possibility 1, maybe 2.
Yeah, 1 or 2 seats, I think is what we're looking at in Indiana. Yes.
Okay.
And the thing is, I think, you had former Governor Daniels come out a couple of weeks ago and say, we shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong, all that sort of stuff. He said, so we're really looking at only 1 seat. So what's really the point of doing this, right? And because we're not going to be able to pick up 2. And I looked at that and I thought, well, no, you can definitely pick up 2 seats, Governor. I mean, it's like that's like you're looking at this from maybe 15 years ago when he was governor, and I was at the RJ when he was governor and got along fine with Governor Daniels. And but with this specifically, we're not just looking at 1 seat. There is the potential for 2 solid Republican pickups into Indiana, ahead of the midterms. And so I think that this is a real conversation that they're having there, and we'll see how it all plays out. But I mean, or do we really want to leave 2 seats on the table?
But the reality is, Adam, my understanding of Indiana is that we're basically 1 Republican vote holdout is probably the better way to describe this. One Republican is holding out from this map being able to get done because the current Senate, the current House, and the governor would all sign it if we have one person would stop holding it up, correct?
Yeah, I think they're really, really close to getting across the line in the Indiana Senate. It's really the Senate. The House has the votes. The governor's ready to sign the map. The AG is ready to go. The lieutenant governor's all on board. The entire congressional delegation's ready to get this done. And it's really just a question of whether the Indiana Senate gets across the line.
All right, let's move to Florida. What's the status there and the potential there?
Yeah, sure. So Florida is one of these places where you see sometimes where Democrats bring a lawsuit and you kind of wonder, well, why would you do that? Like, what's the long-term plan that you're looking to do by bringing this lawsuit? So what happened in 2021 is Governor DeSantis said, look, we cannot keep racially gerrymandering our congressional map. It's just, we should not be doing this. And what happened was Florida had the seat that went from Jacksonville all the way over to Tallahassee, right? And that had been imposed by what was then a Democrat majority Florida Supreme Court in the previous decade. And the governor said, look, this district is not required by the Voting Rights Act. If we draw this district on politics, then we're breaking our state constitution's fair districts requirements. If we draw it off of race, then we're racially gerrymandering because it's not required by the VRA. So I will not sign a map that has that district in it. And over the course of two or three different lawsuits, the governor and his, the team there in Florida successfully defended that map in state court and in federal court and said, that's not something we can do. And so this case out of Florida last year, out of the Florida Supreme Court said, yeah, your districts have to be compact. They have to comply with the law. And the thing with the Florida congressional map is there are districts in South Florida, one in particular, that is not a compact district. It's barely majority minority. And it really just doesn't make sense why it's there. It looks like a claw, right? There's kind of like a fist with two little fingers sticking off from the side of it. And it's like, well, that's not compact in any way. Like the district's not compact. The minority population is not compact in that seat. We're clearly drawing this off the basis of race. Is this really the direction we should be going? And so what Governor DeSantis is doing is saying, look, we need to look at bringing our map into compliance with our own state constitution. No one's challenged the seat. We should probably look at doing things to clean that up. And so I think what people have to remember with Florida is Florida has what's called a Fair Districts Amendment. It was passed by the voters about a decade and a half ago now. And it says, among other things, that you can't draw maps to favor or disfavor a political party, right? And so they cannot partisan gerrymander in Florida, without, we just can't do it, right? So that's the rule. So part of what that means is that people like me who work professionally in politics, who do redistricting full-time, cannot actually speak into the process. I have no First Amendment rights in Florida when it comes to redistricting under Florida's Fair Districts rules. And so what they've done is the Florida House has announced that they're forming a redistricting committee to look at this. They've told folks that if you want to be part of this committee, you cannot be looking at running for office. This is something that's going to be done off of geography and off of compactness and all these other things. And so they're going to move forward. And I think that what you're going to find in South Florida is if you simply get rid of the racial gerrymander that currently exists there and draw compact maps that comply with the law, Republicans can pick up 2 to 3 seats just because you start.
So what's Florida right now? What's their makeup?
Florida's congressional map is currently 20 Republicans and 8 Democrats.
And you think we could possibly get plus what, 3?
I think that, look, if I don't want to couch this too much in that way because it's hard to forecast how they would draw this map, because what they have to do is they have to make sure that they comply with the compactness rules, the city and county lines in Florida. I think that the reality is a compact map that properly complies with the law in Florida probably gives Republicans 3 good pickup opportunities in the state just by complying with the law as it currently.
And they control all the House, the Senate. So this is, we should see something positive out of Florida. Yes,
I would expect to gain seats out of Florida. Yes.
Okay, let's go to Kansas, where my understanding is there was again, this is sort of like Indiana, an opportunity there, but it's saying that Republicans aren't really pressing forward. What's the status of Kansas?
Yeah, so I think you have to remember Kansas has only successfully petitioned themselves into a special session one time in modern history, and that was to deal with egregious COVID restrictions imposed by Governor Kelly back in 2020, and so they dealt with those, petitioned themselves in. Um, they have to have a super majority in order to do that. I think they can lose 3 votes or 3 signatures. What the leadership of the House and Senate have said is that they will take up redistricting during the regular session in January. They're making it a priority to consider it. But again, you have a Democrat governor in Kansas who will veto whatever the legislature puts forward. And so, whether, I think Republicans will likely move on a map. I think they may pass it. The question is, when Governor Kelly vetoes it, will Republicans have the ability, have the votes necessary to override that veto? And this is just the reality of having divided government and having a supermajority is you have to get everybody across the line. So it's a tough lift, but the reality is that Kansas can draw a more compact map that gives them 4 seats. And it's just going to be a question of whether, whether we can keep everyone together to get to override.
So do they have the votes for a supermajority and override of the veto now?
Well, they did not have the votes to petition themselves in for a special session. And I'm not sure what the whip count is presently for in the state's House. But I believe the votes are there in the state Senate. So again, it's going to be a whipping operation in 2026 to see who can get across the line.
All right. Let's move to Nebraska. What's the situation there?
Sure. So Nebraska is probably the state that infuriated me the most in redistricting last cycle. As you know, Nebraska has a heightened stakes because Nebraska awards its 3 congressional votes, 3 congressional based electoral college votes based off of who carries that seat, right? So Nebraska too has in recent history voted for the Democrat candidate several times. And so Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, each got an electoral college vote out of Ruby Red, Nebraska, because of the way Nebraska 2 is drawn. And so there are really 2 options. One is you can repeal the electoral college vote split in the state and make it statewide like 48 other states in the country, or you can redraw the maps in a way that better favors Republicans and make it harder for Democrats to win that district, both for Congress and for the electoral college. So Congressman Bacon's retiring. He'd held that seat for several cycles. It's an open seat now. Look, there are a couple holdouts in Nebraska. It's unicameral. There's so many weird things about Nebraska, right? They have a 1-chamber legislature, and they allow a filibuster. So maybe this is the thing that finally breaks Nebraska's filibuster rules. And Nebraska said, you know what? It doesn't make sense to allow the minority party in the state to dictate policy for the entire state of Nebraska. Maybe it's time we got rid of the filibuster. Maybe some of the Republicans in the Omaha area who have been holding this up for a long time realize, hey, it's not good for Nebraska to send to continue to give its electoral college vote to the Democrat presidential nominee every 4 years. So maybe we should fix that problem. So look, I think there's different ways that Nebraska could get across the line, but it's a difficult state with some very entrenched procedural rules that have to be dealt with if Republicans are going to redraw the state.
So would you say that, for the most part, we don't expect much out of Nebraska, right?
I think it's unlikely, but not impossible. And I think we'll just have to wait and see what happens over the next couple months as Nebraska wrestles with this. They've said it publicly. I know that Congressman Bacon's been supportive of redrawing these maps in the past, is open to leading and being a part of that conversation. And so, I think they should keep talking and see if they can find a path forward.
All right, let's move to New Hampshire in the ends here. It's right now, it's interesting. You've got a state very Republican at the state level, very Democrat at the federal level. What is I guess you could easily redistrict there and get one of those 2 seats.
You could make one seat much more Republican than it currently is. Governor Ayotte has come out very publicly and said that this is not something that she thinks is the right time to redistrict. It's not something that she's in favor of doing. I think the New Hampshire House and the New Hampshire Senate both had maps that they put forward or bills put forward where they could redraw. The thing with New Hampshire that I think people don't realize is that out of every state with a trifecta in the country, Democrat or Republican, New Hampshire is the only one that has not drawn a congressional map this cycle. Governor Sununu vetoed a map in 2022. And so the New Hampshire Supreme Court stepped in and imposed one. And so the map that New Hampshire Supreme Court imposed, they hired an academic from Stanford University to draw the map, right? So New Hampshire, a state with the Republican trifecta, currently has a map drawn by a liberal academic from Stanford University, who also is the author of the Connecticut gerrymander that's locked Republicans out of all 5 seats in Connecticut for the last 20 years. And for whatever reason, New Hampshire can't get together and just say, you know what? It might be good if Republicans had an opportunity to elect one single member of Congress in all of New England. We have Maine 2 as a good pickup opportunity this cycle. Maybe we can just make New Hampshire one a little bit more Republican and give Republicans a chance to have up to 2.
Yeah, why not?
In all of New England. So it's one of those things where it's like Lucy in the football, where it just feels like the football gets pulled away every single time. But look, I think New Hampshire is one of these states where it's not going to be some wild gerrymander. It's not going to look weird. Like, you have various rules in place. You're going to have a seat that leans Republican if Republicans are able to redraw, and we have a chance to win. And it's honestly a cleaner map than the one that we currently had that's been put forward. And I've always been in favor of it. Obviously, I mean, I am the Republican redistricting guy, but I think it just makes more sense for the state. It balances the growth patterns there better. And I've always hoped that Governor Ayotte would get across the line and be supportive of it. But, so far it's something that she's not been interested in taking on.
How about South Carolina? Is there any hope for an additional pickup there on the Republican
there's definitely
side?
hope in South Carolina. I think that, Jim Clyburn's seat is an interesting one. It's definitely a state that we should be watching, a state that we should see what happens in January when the legislature comes back. They're not going to do anything in a special session. I think multiple gubernatorial candidates are now talking about this openly as something that South Carolina should look at doing. I think you have multiple congressional seats that are open now, which gives the state more flexibility to look at it. The other reality with South Carolina that people don't realize is that Jim Clyburn's seat is not majority Black. It's actually about 46.5% African American. And because of that, so if you have a district that's not majority of a single race, right, and it still elects a minority candidate, what you have is evidence of something called evidence that there is no legally significant racially polarized voting. Because in order for that candidate, the minority candidate, to win, they're getting crossover support from Democrat, from whites or whoever else. The other reality in a state like South Carolina, which kind of goes to the general absurdity that we have with the modern applications of the VRA in different places, is who is the senator from South Carolina? Tim Scott. Like, you're electing African American Republicans statewide. And so a lot of the different, issues that you may have had 50, 60 years ago, they don't exist anymore in a state like South Carolina or in a Georgia or some of these other places. And so, if South Carolina redraws, it's going to be part of a much larger national conversation about what representation should look like.
All right. So as I said, the first 4 states, Texas, Ohio, Missouri, North Carolina, yield us 8 additional Republican pickups. And then according to my math from what we discussed, it sounds like potentially 1 or 2 out of Indiana, potentially 3 out of Florida. Let's just call that 4. But as far as my math goes, that's all we can probably count on. Is that fair?
Look, I think there's other states that are potentially in the pipeline that I'm not going to talk about right now. I think that some of those states are definitely possible. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at this moment.
Okay. So let's flip over to the other potential Dem side. Okay. Illinois, you mentioned them a moment ago. They're completely Dem controlled. Can the Dems squeeze anything more out of there?
They say they can. Their qualifying has already closed for 2026. So they would have to reopen qualifying in order to redraw their map. The Black Caucus in state has said they don't want to draw any maps that would dilute the 3 existing Black seats that come out of Chicago. The delegation, the congressional delegation, has signed off on. They said that they're open to it. My understanding is that they're not really open to it, but they signed a letter knowing that it wasn't going to happen. So like, sure, we'll sign this, but we're gonna leave it alone. You had Congressman was it Garcia, I guess, I think that's the right member, literally retired the day after qualifying so his chief of staff could take over for him. So he clearly doesn't think that Illinois is going to be redrawing after he did that. So we'll see what they can do. I think that the reality is for Illinois is you have a couple seats already in the state that were teetering on competitive even before redraw. They have one of the most aggressive, not the most aggressive gerrymander in the country. It's a state that's currently 14-3, 14 Democrats, 3 Republicans. To go to 15-2, and not put anything at risk, you really have to ribbon out the Chicago area throughout the rest of the state. Yeah. And people have to realize that incumbents, as you know, Sean, you've worked in this business for a long time. Incumbents actually like certain things in their districts and don't want other things in their districts. And
right.
There's a point where representation becomes such a problem trying to represent these districts that it becomes impractical for them to grow. All
right, so let's call that a push for now. Maryland is in a similar situation. They control everything there. The Dems do. It's currently 8-1. The Andy Harris Eastern Shore District's the only opportunity there. The governor seems to indicate, Wes Moore, that he's not, or the Senate Majority Leader, rather, has said that he's not seeing this as a possibility. Yet Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader in Washington, says he thinks that might be a possibility. Real quick, in Maryland, what do you think the prospects are of going from 8-1 to 9-0 in favor of the Democrats?
Yeah, so I think the Senate president clearly is the logjam for them, but I think the Senate president is right about one thing in particular, which is he sees this as potential for a huge downside if Maryland does this. And the reason is because Governor Hogan appointed almost the entirety of the Maryland Supreme Court. And just 3 years ago, Maryland court struck down Democrats' last Maryland gerrymander as an unconstitutional partisan gerrymander under Maryland state constitution. And so I think what Senator Ferguson is looking at is the reality that the courts in Maryland it's a Hogan majority state Supreme Court that's likely to say, no, you can't do this. And so best case scenario for them under that scenario is they get the current map. But the reality is that plaintiffs in this case, if they do redraw, I think it's incredibly likely that if they decide to try to go for a 8-0 map in Maryland, the plaintiffs are going to go back and say, well, actually, the map that you should be imposing is a 6-2 map, or maybe even a 5-2-1 map. That, because if you want a proportional map in Maryland, that means that Republicans should have a minimum of 2 seats and an opportunity for a third. And I think that's what Senator Ferguson's concerned about.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll put this as a push because I think you're right. They don't want to gamble. They don't want to play with fire on this.
I think it would be a risky bet for them to do that.
All right, let's walk me back up to New York. Tell me, I know these guys tried to do this once before. The court kind of said, no. Is this similar to Maryland? Is there any opportunity there? Is this a push as well?
Look, I think for New York, they, Elias Law brought a lawsuit 2 weeks ago now, trying to get the New York courts to require that a district be drawn to connect Lower Manhattan with Staten Island, arguing that they should have created a new opportunity seat basically in Brooklyn, minority opportunity district under the New York State Constitution. Here's the reality. If New York State Constitution requires that type of racial gerrymandering in order to comply with the law, then it is in direct contradiction to the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And so those of us who maybe took a class in college or even high school in political science knows that the U.S. Constitution is superior to the New York Constitution. And so I think what they've done is they've set up a what's potentially a landmark case for the United States Supreme Court on whether state constitutions can require racial gerrymandering in contravention of the United States Constitution. And so we'll see how that all plays out. I don't think that I'm skeptical that this lawsuit is going to lead to a redraw of New York's congressional map by 2026. I think the more likely scenario is that the New York legislature will come back in January and they'll start moving towards some sort of a constitutional amendment for their state constitution to maybe give themselves an opportunity to do something in the future.
All right, the last state that I've got on my list right now is my state here in Virginia. This was talk about a sneaky little deal here. These guys, the state constitution requires the General Assembly to address something in a legislative session, allow an election to intervene between it happening again. So the Democrats called a special session right before the election, passed something, and then there obviously an election occurred in November, and then they'll get resworn in with a 64-seat Democrat majority in the House of Delegates. They have a 1-seat majority in the state Senate. So this is going to be a big deal, Adam. I think if it's constitutional, tell me what we need to know about Virginia in 2 minutes or less.
All right, let me see what I can do there. All right, so first off, so Republican plaintiffs and different plaintiff groups brought 2 different lawsuits almost immediately after Democrats started moving forward with this thing. One out in Tazewell County, which is in Western Virginia, and then one in Richmond. The crux of this problem legally is this. What is a general election under the Virginia Constitution? Is a general election the period from the first vote until election day?
Because of early voting. That's why you're saying.
That's right.
I get it.
Or is a general election just the election day, right? If a general election is every day from the beginning of early voting until election day, the Democrats should have had to get this done before early voting started. If general election is just election day, then should we count any votes cast before election day? Right? So there's an open question there about what the law requires and what the law allows in Virginia. One is, what is the definition of a general election? Votes are also coming in after election day. So does that also count? What is the window for election day in Virginia? Number one. Number two, so there are notice requirements in Virginia that you have to post something at state courthouses for a certain period of time before a general election is what the code says. Democrats are now arguing that's not relevant because, yes, it's in the code, but that's arcane. It's left over from our old Constitution from 100 years ago, but we never changed the code until now. So we shouldn't have to do this notice thing before general election. How does that work, right? It's still a law even now. They won't be able to repeal that until the next session in January. The other reality with all these things in Virginia, Sean, as you know, in Virginia, if you don't have a supermajority in the Virginia legislature, when you pass a bill, it does not become law until July 1st. That is the day that all bills passed in Virginia become law and go into effect, even if they're passed during the legislature and signed by the governor. So what are you going to do? You're going to repeal these things or change these things. Look, there's so many different question marks. There's so many different legal questions. I think that the reality is that eventually the Virginia Supreme Court is going to have to weigh in on all of these things, whether there's a federal hook or not. Maybe there's appeal to the United States Supreme Court. And maybe Democrats get across the line somehow. They get this through the legislature and they put it before the voters. And the voters will get to decide whether they want to connect Winchester with McLean, whether they want.
So the way I see this is if Virginia doesn't get it through, we're still looking at Republicans probably pick up at least 12 and Democrats 4. Adam, this has been unbelievably informative. Obviously, as the process wields its way through these different state houses, we'll definitely want to have you back. Thank you for everything that you walked us through today. I guarantee you nobody else is going to do it like we just did with you.
Happy to do it, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Great show. Appreciate it. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.